All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to We Will Defend, the only show on the internet starring Representative Brian Posthumous. Hello, Brian Posthumous. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Rare treat because we are actually in the same room this time. Usually we're recording from afar. We can even prove it. Watch. That's not movie magic, folks. That's all a real shake. We are here live at the state, or across from the State House, at the House Office building, and I'm hanging out today with you, having a good time. And it's sunny out. It's bright and sunny. It's one of those perfect Michigan days. There's like 6 school trips over at the State House right now, and it's one of those awesome times to be here. But we're going quick on this one because you got a meeting in a little bit, but we wanted to check in and let people know what's going on. Let's start with an update on where we left things off a little bit last week with our emergency response to the northern storms. So terrible ice storms have wreaked havoc in northern Michigan, continue to wreak havoc with people's electricity, infrastructure, things like that, and the House has been taking some action to get involved. So you can tell the people what you voted on this week, how you voted, and why. Yeah,
so a couple things. One, we passed out of the House, actually it might have even been unanimous, maybe one no vote, but the emergency supplemental, appropriation supplemental for northern Michigan to help address the natural disaster up there. And then we also passed a bill that would allow an exception for students up in northern Michigan. Right now, you're only allowed a certain number of snow days or whatever before you have to start going extra days in the summer. Well, under that rule, they'd have to stay for an extra 3 weeks in the summer.
Yeah. And
our view is that it's important that kids take that break and enjoy life a little bit, especially summer in northern Michigan.
Yeah.
And so we passed that out of the House as well. We'll see if the Senate takes those up.
So the House passed a bill basically saying kids start summer 3 weeks earlier than they have to right now.
Well, it says that they could exempt for natural disasters the
time they missed.
The time that they missed.
They won't have to make it up.
Yeah.
So this is a save summer vacation bill. So
right.
I know you kids can't vote, but when you can, you remember who saved summer vacation for you,
right?
Up in the north. So when this money goes, it was $7 million? $75 million. Excuse me. This is state money we're talking about. So $75 million. When that starts to go, where does it go?
So it'll be going toward the rebuild effort, right? And cleaning up all the trees and the debris, helping to ensure that the power got restored properly and effectively. One of the things that a lot of people don't think about when you're looking at the storm up there. So if you're driving, it's probably 12 or 13 counties up there, just driving across northern Michigan, the top 2/3 of all of the trees are just gone.
Yeah.
They just snapped off. And so they're all sitting on the forest floor. Well, all of that extra debris sitting on the forest floor, plus having all these standing dead trees, it creates a major fire hazard that it could be problematic for several years down the road.
Heading into summer.
Heading into summer.
So you go from ice storms to wildfires, which would be trauma on top of trauma. So we can't let that happen. And all that costs money. All that takes, people power to get it moving. And so this now heads to the Senate, or were we the final stop this time?
Goes to the Senate.
Goes to the Senate. Are we optimistic in the Senate? Because the Senate's been a little bit of trouble this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think they will recognize the issue and step up and help out.
Yeah. That's actually a good segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. Was the last session, there was tension in the House between the Democratic majority, the Republican minority, and there was some cohesion between the two majorities because the Senate had a Democratic majority as well. Now the Republicans have taken majority in the House of Representatives, and the Democrats keep their majority in the state Senate. What has that created for you all in terms of how you think about legislation, how you think about getting it to the absolute finish line, and what should the people of Michigan know about the likelihood of laws moving, their current legislative climate, how it differs from where it was last year?
Well, one of the things to think about when you have divided government, typically government moves even a little bit slower than it would otherwise. And I will say, a lot of people think that's problematic. I would suggest, I think that's a feature, not a bug. That is what the founders intended when they built the government the way that they did. And that's that it should be deliberative. It should be a slow process. And so when there is divided government, I view that as a good thing because it requires a lot more deliberation and consensus on major issues.
Right. So now we have to Like there was I think it was on The West Wing or something, when the cool grizzled old guy's telling a story about a congressman back in the day shows up to the House of Representatives and says he's a Republican. He's like, let me meet the enemy. Where's the Democrats? And the older Republican says, the enemy aren't the Democrats. The enemy is the Senate. And that is how our government was sort of designed, right? These two houses that would try their best and compete, and like this adversarial system would sort of create the best legislation, all of that. Nowadays, it seems almost like the chambers of government are unifying with executive branches and aligning their party lines. Do you think that the branch of government you're in, the legislative branch, is still functioning as intended at the state and or national level?
At the state level, so over the last 100 years, I think there's been a slow but steady abdication of authority from the legislative branch, primarily to the executive branch, but also the judicial branch. Oh, yeah. Part of that is just by abdication, and like the legislatures federally and statewide, just allowing them to take it over. And then some of it has been done by force and the Supreme Court. And so I don't think that march is good for our country. I believe that the legislative branch should hold on to as much power as they can, because that is the voice of the people. And so my hope is that, the legislative branches federally and at the state levels can start pulling some of that power back.
That would be great. I don't think people realize how important their state government is a lot of the time, and how directly connected it is to their life, and to the great lengths some of your state constitutions have gone to give you representation. Like we were joking the other day, I was talking about the New Hampshire legislature. I was like, what do they have, like 12 people in the New Hampshire legislature? Because it's a small state, and usually it's by like population. They have 109, 100.
No, it's 430 or something like that.
It was like the same. It was like hundreds of representatives in New Hampshire. It's like the most.
They have the most members of the legislature than any other state in the country.
And it creates like this like small classroom thing of like every representative represents like 200 people or something. So it's this incredibly
3,300.
3,300. Man, you could get it. Good. I'm glad he's here. They should just have like a little light that goes off whenever you correct one of my numbers. But like that is kind of interesting. Do you think Michigan now has a population balance with our own representation? And do you think that's something that needs to be tweaked? Like, when was the last time our state government grew its seats?
So our government is set. We have a constitutionally mandated 110 member House and 38 member Senate.
That's not changing anything.
And that's not changing anytime soon. Now, the last time the Constitution was amended was in the 60s. I don't know if it changed at that point or not, like if that number changed at that point. I don't think it did, but I could be wrong about that. But basically, that means that each member of the House of Representatives represents around 93,000 people, and each member of the Senate represents about 270,000, I think, or something like that. For me, I think that's fine. I like how it works. I couldn't imagine being one of 430 members of the House. Like, how do you get anything done that way?
Yeah, we have enough trouble here with.
It's like herding toads into a wheelbarrow.
Impossible. Right. I usually think of herding cats. That's the phrase, which is tough, but herding toads would be even tougher.
Well, and that's the thing, because it's like once you get one person in the wheelbarrow, you go to the next one, and the next one's out.
Yeah, because
so
toads
it's loading up toads into a wheelbarrow.
Pretty good. Is that a Michigan saying or a Brian saying?
I heard that from a former Speaker of the Michigan House. Oh, nice. I don't know where he heard it from, or.
And now you've carried on the tradition.
Yeah.
And now you, as the floor leader, will continue. Like that phrase will live on here in Lansing. Okay, so our system isn't maybe quite as focused as New Hampshire, but apparently they like their ratios. Last week on the floor, your big legislative push of the year, House Joint Resolution B, was on the floor. It did not pass. Can you explain a little bit about what it means for a constitutional amendment not to pass? Why you think this one didn't pass, and what happens next?
Yeah. All right. So let's start with amending the Constitution, right? Because House Joint Resolution B was an amendment to the Constitution that would require proof of citizenship when registering to vote and photo ID when casting your ballot. The idea is to ensure that only U.S. citizens vote in our elections. And so House Joint Resolution B would have amended the Constitution to do that. There are three ways to amend the Constitution in Michigan. One is through a constitutional convention, which is where people convene and they just redraft the
governor
Constitution.
Has to call?
No, so that is done. So every, I want to say 16 years, and this year is one of those 16 years, there's a question on the ballot, the general election ballot, asking should a convention be called. So it can be done that way, and then I think it can be done legislatively. Like one can be called legislatively as well, but I don't know how that works. I don't remember off the top of my head. So you can amend the Constitution through a constitutional convention, or you can amend it through legislative action, which is what we did, which is what I attempted to do with House Joint Resolution B, which would require a vote of 2/3 in the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and then it skips the governor and goes to the general election ballot for a referendum, so a vote of the people.
And that's like a straight up yes or no.
Yeah, should the Constitution be amended to, and then it's a 100-word summary that's provided, and then so again it requires 2/3 of the House. Unfortunately, the Democrats voted against it on party lines, which I thought was nuts, because nearly 85% of the population agree that only U.S. citizens should vote in our elections, and photo ID should be required when casting your ballot. But they lined up in opposition to it and cast their ballot against 85% of the population.
It was odd how many Democrats that day were giving speeches starting with things like "I agree" and "This should happen," and then voted no.
Well, what's interesting about that is, like, I mean, you talk every elected Democrat that you talk to, including Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who is our chief elections official, and the Democrats' presumptive nominee for governor. They will all tell you that they believe that only U.S. citizens should vote in our elections. And further, Jocelyn Benson actually admitted in a press conference about a month ago, maybe, stated publicly that there is a loophole in our election system created by the Democrats, purposely or accidentally, but there is a loophole in our election system that allows for foreign nationals to vote in our elections. And so my view is, and this is why we tried it legislatively, because my view is, okay, if you genuinely believe and genuinely agree that only U.S. citizens should vote in our elections, and you acknowledge that there is in fact a loophole in our election system right now that allows foreign nationals to vote in our elections, wouldn't you join in and close that loophole? And unfortunately, they didn't want to do that. They put politics over good policy.
And another thing to note, too, was your resolution was not terribly prescriptive. There wasn't necessarily things in there saying, like, things have to be done this way, things have to be done that way, we're going to enforce this way. It was more conceptual than that, in terms of we're gonna basically take this as the go-ahead to start designing the more specific legislation that will inform all of these things. And even at that point, they were willing to sort of throw up the stop sign. And again, every single Democrat did vote no. What do you think it is about their party right now that this is an issue where they have to? Because there are some that wanted to vote yes.
Yeah, and I know that because they told me. They told me.
And they were told not to and listened. Why would you think they were being told not to, and why would they agree?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think over the last 10 years or so, the Democrats have really dug their heels in on being anti-photo ID, on anti-ID to vote, right? And they've really dug their heels in on that, claiming it's racist or classist or any number of justifications that they come up with, which I frankly think is an insult.
Too expensive.
Yeah. So they've dug their heels in on that issue particularly, and then when you have the Secretary of State coming out continuously opposing it, who again is likely to be their nominee, I think they felt like they had to fall in line in order to prevent her being out on this major limb all by herself coming into a general election for governor.
And it seems like the sort of order of operations for this, where as we talked about in a previous episode, we had a student from China who voted by his admission not to break the rules because he thought he was following the rules, and went through our system unstopped, voted, had the vote counted, realized later this was illegal, and confessed to the illegality. That then prompted the investigations from the Secretary of State, right? So if he hadn't come forward, she wouldn't have looked into it. Even when she did look into it, she found 16 people. But we don't know if that's the limit of it at all, right?
Right. So again, and this is one of my major points, right? Like, believe him or not, what he is saying, what the student is saying, is that he genuinely believed that he had the legal right to vote. Not only did he believe he had the legal right to vote, but at the University of Michigan, right, at college campuses, all of your professors are encouraging you to vote. There's rallies on campus trying to tell you get out to vote. Every student organization is telling you to get out to vote. So not only did he believe that he had the right to vote, but he was constantly being encouraged by fellow students and professors to go vote. And so he did. That ballot counted, and then he realized, okay, I can't. That was the wrong thing. My view is, shouldn't we have the guardrails in place that say, okay, you can't vote, so you're not going to be able to. Like the guardrails should be in place that prevented him from voting, not just let him vote even though it was illegal to do it. I mean, saying that we don't need the guardrails in place because it's already illegal. I mean, that's a ridiculous argument. It's illegal to break into somebody's house, but you still put a lock on your door.
Right. Yeah, you still have to back it up with the authority of the law and the ability to enforce if things like this happen. Because if we have these, the amendment is kind of what we need almost as a baseline to start really understanding the problem. You talked about that before. Can you touch on that really quick before we talk about what happens a little bit next with the amendment, of just like how this is really the beginning of a process? When even if this amendment passed, it wouldn't be the end of a battle. It'd be just the next step of a
So like I said, there are three ways to amend the Constitution. First way is constitutional convention. Second way is legislatively, and we did present that in a manner that allows us to bring it back up at any time if we choose to.
Still on
and maybe there is an option to bring it up legislatively again. So so that there's still that. And then the third way to amend the Constitution is through citizen-led. Through a citizen-led initiative, a petition drive, and so I'm leading an effort for that as well to collect signatures and put it on the ballot that way, and so we'll see. It's not over yet. I'm committed to making sure that this is on the ballot in November, one way or the other.
So what's the difference between a citizen-led initiative and them just voting on something you passed here in the House? Is it just a matter of it would just get on the ballot quicker, or you wouldn't have to collect the signatures? Is sort of
so. The two ways that it goes to the ballot is either the legislature puts it on the ballot by passing it out of the House and Senate with 2/3, or you have to collect. Right now, it's like 441,000 signatures. So you can do it either way. The signature collection process could be really difficult, can be expensive. It's hard to organize. Legislative process is hard to get 2/3 of two different chambers to agree on anything. So there, and rightfully so, right? Like our Constitution should be difficult to amend. It should be.
Shouldn't be a Google form,
right? I mean, there's a reason why our U.S. Constitution doesn't have 1,000 amendments, right? Because it's difficult to amend.
You know they would if they could. So a little bit of your thinking here was it could have just gone immediately to the people, but because it's now passed through the state house, even in this this quote unquote failed state, we now know for this record roll call vote that had to happen on HJR-B where people officially stand. So people can now know. Your legislators can say what they want, but when they had the chance to move the ball forward, here's what they did.
Yep.
In terms of support on our side, we'll round it up pretty soon. There's a busy guy over here. But in terms of support on our side, were we very aligned on this? Like, how did Republicans show up?
Oh, yeah. It was a party-aligned vote. Every Republican supported it, and every Democrat opposed it.
Wow. So... And in terms of normal legislation, if this was not a constitutional amendment, it would have passed because of our majority.
Right.
So the only reason it didn't pass is because we took this harder path to try and do it with the 2/3.
Right.
If it had passed our chamber and went to the Senate, just in a theoretical sense, what do you think would have happened over there?
I don't think the Senate Majority Leader would have even put it up for a vote.
You don't think it would have even, okay.
No.
So, and that's happened with a few of our bills already. So again, the enemy is the Senate.
I've learned in politics, number one, you don't have any friends, you only have allies, and you should never make an enemy only a temporary adversary because enemies accumulate.
Yeah, they really do. What I think Coach Mike Ditka said, I don't hold grudges, but I have a good memory. And I think there's a lot of politicians like that who are like, I may not be actively wanting bad for you, but I remember that stuff and it might come back. Okay, so HJR-B could come back up onto the floor again. Can you just, last thing, explain what it means that you said? What was it at the very end? It was... motion to table or
a motion to reconsider.
motion to reconsider? Yeah, what's a motion to reconsider, and where does that leave it?
So if a bill fails, you can do a motion to reconsider the vote, and at any point you can bring that up to vote on it again. And so I made the motion to reconsider, so it was known and evident to everybody that at any time this can come back up for a vote.
Gotcha. You won't have to start all the way over with this. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, we'll get you out of here quick so you can go to your next thing. Last thing, just give us a quick tour of the boots because I'm looking at them. They're on camera. They're fantastic. What are these boots? Where are they from, and how long have you had them?
These are Ariat boots. I've had them since, I believe, September of 29, maybe August or 2019. So
Oh, wow.
August or September 2019.
Pretty beat up for some good boots.
Well, these are my dress boots, not even my work boots. You should see my work boots.
My work boots are literally on fire. they don't work anymore. All right. What was the brand? Ariat?
Ariat.
Okay. Well, I gotta get me some Ariats. These are Skechers, and they're French. So, all right. Well, fantastic. Thank you as always for your time. Good luck at the next thing you've got going to, and we'll check in with everybody again next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.